we did talk about how Muslims were disagreeing regarding the different Arabic Qurans. We talked about how people were having problems. Sorry, how there were different recitations, and then that was causing problems, and then they tried to make one universal Quran, but that failed. That was kind of in a big picture. But let's get to be reminded, and then we pick it up from there. So let me see if everything goes well. By the way, so we will be commenting on the video as the video is on the screen, so it's gonna be like on as it is playing. Once that start happening, can we get the sound confirmation, because in somehow sound is not kind of working well apparently, but we'll see. Let's get on with it. So
we noticed that at different times in history, we do have certain readings in the Quran that they were excluded from, what we call now the canon. So we call basically the first stage, what everyone is familiar with, the Uthmanic Codex. And this is the first canonization process where the readings or the codices of the companions of Muhammad, they were excluded based on the Codex of Uthman. So even though Uthman's attempt to limit the variants of the Quran to one codex, variant readings kept multiplying. And this is evident from the early works of grammar and exegesis that we have, that you have uncontrollable amount of variants that Muslims were using and circulating among themselves. So the second canonization is what Ibn Mujahid did out of a corpus of, I don't want to say unlimited, but many readings that existed back then, probably as many as 50, as sources tell us. He chose 7 readings. And also in Ibn Mujahid's system, when he chose the 7 readings, each reading was not unique. So you can see also there are differences within one reading. So we find many readings in Ibn Mujahid that people stopped reciting today, and even stopped reciting 300 years, after him. He also disagrees, I think 7 or 8 times with the canonical readings themselves. He also has a lot of, I think I counted 64 transmission errors in his book, where he said that this transmission is wrong, this is wrong, it should be this way, it should be that way. Around 150 years later on, in North Africa and Muslim Spain back then, so we have Abu Amr al-Dani and al-Shatibi, both of them, they were scholars of Qira'at, and they were mainly responsible for limiting those different variations or different students and limiting them into 2 only. So people dislike the fact that you are limiting them to a canon. Why are you limiting us to 2 per 1, i.e. 14 transmissions? And we have more readings, we have more variations. 300-400 years later, Ibn al-Jazari in the 9th century Hijri, Islamic calendar, so that would be around the 1400s, he came and added 3 more readings to those 7 by Ibn Mujahid. So that's the 4th period where really the system of 10 readings, or 10 canonical readings, what we call them. And then what I call the 5th canonization, it's the 1923-1924 Cairo edition of the Quran, based on Hafs and Asim. Most Muslims became familiar with that variety, mainly due to the publication, of that codex or that, Mus'haf in Cairo. Even though we have, of course, other editions from other readers, but most people are familiar still, even until today, familiar with that variety. How do we understand this concept of tawatur vis-a-vis qira'at or variant readings when many accounts from the classical sources do not agree with this concept of tawatur? In the early period, Muslims did not talk about this concept of tawatur, and it's very evident that the variant readings were local. So people in Damascus were transmitting things different, from people of Kufa or people from Mecca and Medina, and the reading or the variant reading was a local thing rather than widely transmitted system that every single Muslim or even every single scholar knew of. If you don't have variant reading, you can't read the Quran. It's as simple as this. It's just you need the vowels and you need diacritics in order to read it. There's a, you can't read the Quran using your own opinion. And that's, in the Islamic tradition, you have to rely on how your, master taught it and how his master taught it. So you can't just, do textual criticism. You can, of course, but you may not within the tradition. So there's a difference between someone who is, who has a manuscript and say, okay, I'm going to do textual criticism. I'm going to read the Quran on my own. And some scholars did that, back in the days. But of course, they were reprimanded. So this is a little bit problematic from the sense of documentation. We don't have enough documentation from the early period, and we don't know how much writing and orality were intertwined back then. And I'm talking here 8th century. Okay. There was a time when the Quran was codified during the time of Uthman, when orality lost to written transmission. And what I mean by that is that Muslim scholars all agreed that regardless of your memory, regardless of how you memorize the Quran, you cannot deviate from the Uthmanic Codex. So even though certain readers, they were sure of how they memorized the Quran through other channels, and they were saying that I have a good chain of transmission. I studied with X and Y and Z people. Muslim scholars post Ottomanic period, they didn't care. As long as you are deviating from the text, we are not going to accept your reading. So when someone tells you, well, the Quran was orally transmitted regardless of the rasm, regardless of the Uthmanic consonantal text, that's not accurate. There's no such thing as only oral transmission. You have to oral transmission based on the text. So there are even transmissions on behalf of the canonical readers, which were also classified as shawaz, as irregular, not accepted. There are also readings attributed to the Prophet himself. We have a category in Qira'at, it's called the readings of the Prophet. Okay, and there are 3 or 4 books even written on that in Arabic. Even though we do have accounts that go back to the Prophet saying that he read this word as such, this word was also categorized as irregular or shawaz. Just like they didn't care. As long as the readings deviate from the Uthmanic Codex, we will consider them to be irregular or shawaz. Even though we know that the Prophet might have read as such, and we also know that the other companions might have read as such. However, the Codex of Uthman abrogated all other codices, abrogated all other readings, and we are going to stick with that. We also have, information from Iraq, from Kufa, that people kept reading according to the codices, let's say, of Ibn Mas'ud, even 150 years after Uthman. So it's uncontrollable in a sense. People were still reading according to the Codex of Ibn Mas'ud, which is different from the Codex of Uthman. In Ibn Mas'ud is very interesting because
So let's stop here for a couple of seconds. So this is the place almost where we stopped last time. So in summary, whatever was there before Uthman has the power of abrogating the word of Allah, and then he abrogates everything. So because of all those messes, we are having Quran, and we are having narratives has holes in it. And 2018, some of the Muslim missionaries and some of Muslims and Professor Yasin Dutton came together to come up with good reason or justification regarding the preservation of the Quran. And in that discussion, I put up the clip, like I think a couple of weeks ago. In that discussion, it was expressed the information Professor Shady Nasser is bringing up is causing fitna. Okay, but Muslims had approximate 2 years, just nearly 2 years to prep and then come up with good answers. So far we don't have proper answer, but we'll see. We never lose hope. So 2 years, maybe in couple of weeks, Muslim will come up proper justification and answers regarding what Professor Shady Nasser is telling us. There were different Arabic Qurans were circulating. Someone who never met Muhammad, someone who never had revelation from Allah, who never had chit chat with Gabriel, thought it was all right for him to pick among minimum of 50 different Arabic Qurans, minimum 50. There are tradition talks about there are up to 900. Minimum 50 Arabic Qurans, pick up 7. And then we heard that actually Muslims were not happy with those choice. And then time went on, it became 10. And then time went on, it became 14. And then, of course, all those people have their student that makes already over 30 different Qurans. But a quick bottom line is there has been lots of issues when it comes to perfect preservation of the perfect one and only Quran. Give birth to many Quran. And I can't remember if it's gonna come up or not. And all those Qurans have been picked up in the intention of in the intention of political views. So today Muslims are using Hafs Quran from 1924 because Ottoman Empire was the peacemakers, as they were making peaces and as they were sharing life with other part of the world. They were bringing their Quran, and that's the Quran they were using in 1924, because majority of the Muslim world were using 1920 Hafs Quran. Therefore, in 1924, they picked Hafs Quran, and then we do have two writings which are talking about even they had different Hafs Qurans. They picked the Ottomans Hafs Quran. That's like another different issue. But Daughter of Christ, do you have you got anything to remind us from the what we already looked at last week?
He talked about tawatur, which is the chain.
Yeah.
Which what Muslims talk about as being the basis, how they know the Quran is transmitted correctly, and the Hadith even. And he said that tawatur wasn't even a concept back in early Islam. Tawatur came later on in Muslim history as Muslims were trying to prove that it is authentic what they have, and it isn't. We know of broken chains. Last time, sister, you showed chains of transmission where people disagreed in each other in the middle of the chain, the beginning of the chain. And also that he said there's no such thing as oral tradition. That is independent from the text. You need the text. And someone said in the chat here, the weakest ink is stronger than the strongest memory. So you need the written text. We have a question. Servant Girl says, how did Uthman determine the truth, and how did he know that he wasn't burning Allah's words?
Okay. Do you want to make a comment on that?
Good question. He probably, no one gave him authority. He may well have burnt Allah's words. We know that the different mushafs of the Sahaba were different.
He did. It's not he may, he did.
Yeah.
Let me make a quick comment on what you previously said. I did express that I think a couple of years ago I even put something in DCCI blog where we talked about broken chains or something, or broken golden chains or something. I can't even remember the name, but we kind of looked at the chains and how this chain thing is like more awesome. So idea is individual took person A took the Quran from Muhammad, and then person B took the Quran from Muhammad, person C took the Quran from Muhammad, and then D, E, F, G, like other people came and then took the Quran from those people, and then it passed the next generation, and then next people took up, next people took up. But even if we are so kind of blind, brainless, if you are so much brainless, okay, like think your brain, you left your brain in freezer, then with that mind, when you look at the earliest manuscripts, none of the early manuscripts are talking about chains. None of the early manuscripts are giving the names of those individuals. And when we look at the Islamic tradition, we don't even know, we don't even have like basic information about those individuals, let alone some informations we have already identifies these individuals are like does not fit in the criteria of Islam, because in the mind of Muslims is those people were good, they had a good memory, they had good characters, they were trustworthy, but Hafs is identified as someone who what do you say, someone takes your things without permission and they never return it back.
Thief.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was taking people's book and then he never returned, and he was identified as liar. People didn't trust him to take the hadith, but they trusted him when it come to the eternal word of Allah. Individuals in the chains, in those like names, they were simply disagreeing with one another intentionally and actively regarding what's supposed to be in the Quran. Those are just bunch of names. Even if you leave your brain in the freezer, with your frozen brain, your basic questions are not being answered. That is the bottom line.
Yeah, and remember what Muslims were saying? Word for word, letter for letter, sound for sound.
Dot
From
by dot.
Jibreel.
Let's correct that, sister. Don't make me to correct you. Dot by dot, letter by letter, word by word, sound by sound. 4 things. Dot is very important, even though in the time of Uthman they didn't have the dots, but the Quran we have is like dot by dot, letter by letter, sound by sound, word by word, exactly the same.
Yeah, I just don't want people to get lost in the detail.
That's
the main what dawah gangs and all Muslims have been told, actually, that's nothing has changed. Nothing. Zero. And yet we have all these details of all these changes, broken chains, disagreements, burnings of the Quran being drowned in the Nile.
like what they do, what happens with Islam is like if there is a problem, they burn it. Sorry, they let sheep to have a dinner. After that, they burn it. After that, they destroy it. That's like 700s. After they sunk it. And it's like so much water and fire. It's like, it's not good at all.
And yet, we still have different Qurans today. It didn't work, all that burning and drowning and
Yep.
Yeah, all that effort. So
but,
yeah, that's where we are, sister.
Yeah, but even with that, with all the power of the ship, with all the power of burning, destroying, sinking, with all that, it still didn't work. Allah failed to protect his one and only book, Surah 15 verse 9. And today, Muslims are publishing books that, yep, there are different Arabic Qurans. Here is some examples. I had a conversation with someone on Sunday. This Muslim guy was like, without any shame. Like, sometimes you would expect, like people know they lie. You would expect them to have little bit shame. But he had like zero shame. He said, if you get rid of all the Qurans in the world, okay, and then you bring people from North Africa, from Europe, and from England, you would still put the Quran together as in exactly form. And this guy is not even like scholar. Like, remember what Sheikh Yasir Qadi said. He said like, oh, Allah knows best. I don't know what
Well,
I would
he
put.
should have told Sheikh Yasir Qadi to put what to put on the empty mushaf when he was asked then.
Yeah, but anyway, so he simply kind of.
But that's because he's a regular Muslim. He's not part of the elite circles that that they keep that secret. He's in the public, akhi. That's what the public is told.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
so and then the question, what was the question you brought up, sister? Did Uthman, who gave Uthman to do such a thing? Actually, no one gave authority to Uthman. As a caliph, he put that authority to himself, and then he decided when the chief of the army, chief of the Muslim army from Azerbaijan approached him and then said like, okay, we've got to do something because now people are becoming calling one another kafir. We don't want what happened to the Jews and Christians. We don't want it to be like this. Let's make one perfect Quran. Before that, in the time of Abu Bakr, remember it was the Buddha innovation that they put the Quran together. And then we end up in 650s, Uthman thinks, yep, I know much better than Prophet. I know much better than Allah, and I can't trust Allah. Abu Bakr didn't trust Allah. I cannot trust Allah. I cannot trust this Gabriel will ever turn up and then tell me what to do. I do it by myself. And then what he did, he ordered all Quranic manuscripts to be burned, and Hafsa didn't. They couldn't do Hafsa's manuscripts while Hafsa was alive, so they burned Hafsa's manuscripts soon after she died. They couldn't even like keep that, and intention was we want to have one perfect book. That was the intention, but as it went to 900s, they weren't able to do that.
Well, sister, what should have happened was, because Muhammad's main job in life was to give the Quran to people.
No.
What they should have done is gather it when he's still alive and have him check it before he died.
Yeah, but he couldn't read and write. Like, he wouldn't even know what was inside. That's the first thing. And even
they could read it to him. They could read it to him.
Oh well. Like, he had lots of different versions. Even though, like, that could be done at the time of Muhammad, and then they could simply just like write as the revelation comes, and as the Allah abrogates all those messy things. But I'm not sure if I would say Muhammad's main job was to pass the Quran to people, because like, remember, he had lots of wives, and then he had to deal with.
He was busy.
Yeah, like, he needs to makes his wife happy. He can't get them flowers and chocolates every day. What he's gonna do is, like, he didn't have time to deal with the word of Allah.
And all the battles he had to go to too.
Yeah, and other thing is, like, in a serious side of it. One of the first thing Allah creates is a pen. That already gives the impression. Remember, Allah writes by his own hand with his pen. So that shows writing was very important. Being able to read and write was very important. And Muhammad was a prophet for over 20 years. Claimed to be prophet over 20 years. You could easily learn how to read and write within a year. And he didn't even give attention and the priority to the word of Allah, to learn how to read, to learn how to write and read. But his priority was different things.
Well, I'm not as wise as Allah, but it would have been a lot easier if Allah had chosen someone who can read and write, who would write the revelations as they come, and then they would have a book by the end of it.
Yeah, but like as a Christian, we could say God uses the weak individuals. God uses lots of different people. Maybe intention of Allah was to make something from Muhammad, but sadly, no, because Allah was there to please Muhammad. But anyway, that's changing the topic. So far what we have is Quran has been corrupted. And there are lovely holes in the narrative, and then like there are really seriously holes in the narrative. So let's continue where we left.
Reading according to the Codex of Ibn Mas'ud, which is different from the Codex of Uthman. In Ibn Mas'ud is very interesting because we, you know, as also many people pointed out, you know, we have so many accounts about his rejection and his opposition, right, to the committee that Uthman formed. And he was saying, you know, I'm one of those senior companions of the Prophet. He was criticizing Zayd bin Thabit, the head of the committee. You know, you were a little kid playing with the other kids, and you know your forelock was dangling, you know, from your head, while I was taking the Quran fresh from the mouth of the Prophet. We always have to remember. Readings, system readings, or eponymous readings are very attached to geography. Even
so, he's talking about Ibn Masud's Quran. Ibn Masud's Quran was different from Zayd bin Thabit's Quran. But that's not the only issue. It's been expressed again and again that Ibn Masud expressed that actually I am not happy for Zayd bin Thabit to be in that committee. I should be the one who's supposed to be in that committee, because by the time like Zayd bin Thabit was like growing up, I learned the Quran from Muhammad and I am more trustworthy. But who cared about him? No one. No one even gave any attention to him. And of course, if you remember the story that they broke his hip because he didn't want to give his Quran, and then he warned people, do not give your Quran, do not take the Quran from Zayd bin Thabit. So no one kind of gave any attention to him with all of his objections. Sad.
Which just goes to show it's not just a different in accents, is it? Muslims say the qira'ats are different in accents. He knows Ibn Mas'ud had problem with the differences in the Quran,
yeah, so
and they had to break his hip.
Yeah, he had 111 chapters, and current Quran contains 114 chapters. But it's not only these 111 chapters. He expresses like, don't take the Quran of other people. And then we can look at the Islamic tradition, and then we can even see some of the differences. And those were like big deal for this guy.
Yeah, I'm trying to say that it's Muslims say it's just accents. No, there were real differences that people thought about, and they even broke his hip. And Ibn Mas'ud isn't just about anyone. Muhammad praised him while Muhammad was alive about how he recited the Quran. There's hadiths about that.
Yeah. Other thing is actually regarding the different accents. Let me actually see if you can see my screen. Yeah. So regarding the different accents, when recently actually I received an email, someone was telling me the way I pronounce answer, I shouldn't pronounce like word W in that. So he's correcting my pronunciation. He's not correcting my writing, but he's correcting my pronunciation. So if it was just the different accents or different recitations, you just tell people or ask people to do practice on how to pronounce that word. But in this occasion, no. How do we fix that? We simply break your hip. That's how it is going. Like, it's very sad actually.
And remember, a lot of the Muslims that were around Muhammad were from Quraysh. They're the same place. Same tribe.
Yeah.
So why would they have all these different accents? This is just another lie to cover up.
Yeah. Remember,
tribe.
Muslim missionary was asking Yasin Dutton regarding, oh well, they're all like same people. They are not like those women, or like they are two good men's. Why Prophet is giving them different versions of the Quran? And then answer was, Allah knows best. Allah knows best. Let me actually put on the screen. I don't know if you can see. I put on the screen Masud's saying. He says, how can you order me to recite the readings of Zayed when I recited from very mouth of the Prophet some 70 surahs? Am I, asks Abdullah, to abandon what I acquired from the very lips of the Prophet? Do you want me to forget what, like, Muhammad give it to me? Why do you want me to go with the recitation of Zayd bin Thabit? I was there, like, I already knew, like, I got not one, not two, not three, not four, but 70 surahs. 70 surahs from Prophet himself. And of course, that's not enough. That's not enough. Is the more better miracle. They come, and then what they've done to him, they said, oh, let's go out and have hot chocolate. Let's go out and have hot chocolate. And then instead of hot chocolate, they gave him broken hips.
The question is, why didn't they take his knowledge that he had? He's telling them, I've got it from the mouth of the Prophet. Don't they care about what came from the mouth of Muhammad?
Not really. If they did, they wouldn't break his hips, would they?
Yeah, I think they were just determined to go with the plan that they had. They didn't care about this person who was with Muhammad from the beginning and what Muhammad had to say. They just had this plan of making this one Quran. They didn't care if it was correct or not. That's what I get from this.
Oh, what I get is there are holes in the narrative.
And look how violent the best generation is. The generation of Sahaba are, they tell us they're so lovely with each other. They were godly people. They're breaking each other's hips.
Yeah, that's what it is called, like loving.
Violence.
Yeah, it's called love language. People
Can you imagine
express
what they
their
do with
love
the
language.
kuffar?
Yeah.
Imagine if they do with the kuffar, if they're doing this to one of the greatest Sahaba, break his hip.
Yeah, like, what do you expect? So it is their love language. This is like, some people's love language is like quality time. Some people's love language is, I don't know, like you give gifts, or like, there are lots of things. Muslims' love language in the first century was like, let's see who is gonna break hip. And so oh, sorry, you can't see me. You can't see. Sorry, I thought I was sharing my screen. Let me actually go back to screen.
There's a couple of comments in the chat. People are saying they like how you said answer before, to keep saying it that old way.
What?
Okay.
Yes. So you want me to have different recitation? Come on, people. That is gonna, in the future, that is gonna cause fitna. We don't want to cause fitna. So let's focus. Ibn Masud's Quran was 111 surah, and people are talking like approximately 300 years, 200 years after what happened to Ibn Masud. They are talking about, they are seeing this gentleman's Quran. They are seeing this gentleman's Qurans, like his manuscripts are still around and circulating. And this is the man whom they simply broke his hip. It's like so loving, like, oh, let's have hot chocolate. For us, they have hot chocolate. Let me just get rid of your hip. Your hip doesn't suit you. Allah made a mistake when He gave you two good hips. And then, yes, so amazing. And then we do have traditions like I've got lots of examples on how how people were disagreeing with the Ibn Masud, but that's not our topic. That's not our topic. Our topic is just go through some of the fitna Professor Shady Nasser is putting forth. Anything else from the? Is there any comments from the chat needs to get our attention, or we just move on with the video?
No. Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on with the video.
Till today, if you talk to people, in Morocco, they are very proud of their Warsh reading. You have people in Africa, they're very conservative about Abu Amr ibn al-Ala. People are attached locally to their reading. And this was the case also back then. People in Kufa, they were, groupies in a sense. It was the group of Ibn Mas'ud. And they did not want to abandon the reading of Ibn Mas'ud for political reasons. There's a lot of politics happening back then. And we do have, actually, there's an interesting account which you don't find in other accounts. There's some kind of tension between Zayd bin Thabit and Ibn Mas'ud. And actually, sorry, Ibn al-Arabi, not Ibn Khaldun, the jurist. He said that people claimed that Uthman and sent someone to beat Ibn Mas'ud. It even reached the stage of beating him and breaking some of his rib bones because of his opposition to to the Codex of Uthman. Unfortunately, we don't have manuscripts from that period, but it is very interesting. This
Uthman, the man who burns the Quran, thinks, yep, we can get away just breaking the hips of this gentleman. Why? Because he simply doesn't want to give us his Quran. We can't get rid of his Quran. What do? Is we do the next best thing. We get rid of him.
Yeah, by sending him a group to beat him up like a thug.
Good thing is they didn't post him anything.
It's a good thing they didn't kill him, actually.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if in this occasion, if it's suffering is better than suffering is better than not being alive. Not sure about that. Because this guy like suffered and suffered and suffered.
And he was sincere. He had nothing, I think he had nothing to gain, really. He just wanted people to have what Muhammad said, what he got from the lips of Muhammad. Like, what did he do to deserve being beaten up and have his bones broken?
Because he wasn't listening, sister. Because he had different Quran and he didn't want to share it. He didn't want to compromise his Quran. If you don't compromise with the word of Allah, this is what happens. That's an amazing lesson. And then, of course, remember what they did to Hafsa.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue.
Paradox is that the the Quran is transmitted via tawatur. We have different ways of reading it. How did these eponymous readings or system readings, how were they transmitted? Were they also transmitted via tawatur? And the answer is also problematic, because it seems that in the early period they were not thinking, this concept of tawatur was not applicable to qira'at. Okay, it was basically a local thing. This is the reading of the community, let's say, of Kufa or the community of Medina. Later on, what we call the usulis, the scholars of usul al-fiqh, principles of jurisprudence, they came up with this principle of tawatur. However,
did you hear that?
Very interesting.
That wonderful chains, actually, invention of human beings, and it was mainly focused on the local. And then as the time went on, it became the most important thing in the Muslim circle. Answer is not even simple, like complicated and problematic, actually, he said. Answer to that question is problematic.
Yeah, he said the concept of tawatur was not applicable in the early stages. Only when the usulis came later on, they said, oh, let's invent this concept called tawatur.
Just a moment. Here's the thing I don't understand. I want to tell you a story which was told around 1600. I'm gonna tell you, and I'm gonna tell you who told me that story. I didn't read it anywhere because like writings have not been circulated that well, but I know my father heard from someone who was so far from him, but by accident my father heard from him. And then I know that person whom my father heard, Mr. X, heard that information from someone who was living like 50 miles far from him, from Mr. B. Mr. B heard that from his grandfather told him. And according to that story, around 1600, that's 400 years ago. And I want to tell you the story, but I want you to know those names are so important, okay? By the way, don't be surprised if you never hear those names before me. You will be hearing those names from now on. Everyone is gonna tell you about those names, and those things are gonna affect those individuals. The story they told from one generation to other generation to other generation to other generation will be affecting your eternity. And then it all goes with the basic lines of once upon a time, once upon a time, once upon a time. That's how it works. That's how it happened. Like 400, 500 years after they decided, yeah, let's come up with the names so that no one can get rid of this. Why? Because so far Quran has been perfectly preserved. And what we do is like, we can't encourage anyone to come up with the idea that Quran maybe did not preserve, and we cannot leave any place someone to come and then tell us he's the examples of different Qurans. What are we gonna say? We know Quran is reliable word of Allah because he's a bunch of names who never met with one another, who never met with Muhammad, and those names all end up in history much later.
And sister, I remember something I learned from you the other time, is that we don't even have this chain, the Tawatur chain, in any of the early Mus'haf manuscripts.
Yep. I paid lots of money. I paid lots of money for those Mus'hafs. Really lots of money. And now they don't even have those names in it. I should sue them, I think. Like once this R block talk guy sues me, once I deal with that law case, I will be suing those companies who publish those earliest Mus'hafs without the isnad on it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about people crying and going to the law. Like Muslims get refuted in Speaker's Corner, they call the police. Unitarians get refuted here on this channel, they go and go to the court. I don't know what it is, people going crying to the legal system to help with your argument. Yeah, just have a good argument.
Yeah, so in here what is happening is like, because it's something Islamic, okay? Early Muslims are going to these scholars and then saying, these people, oh, now we've got different Qurans and my Quran is being rejected. They want me to use that Quran. What should I do? What should I do? And then guy says, we know the solution. As soon as you've got those names, that's the correct Quran. Let's write down the names. That's what they've done.
Yeah, we got a Muslim in the chat. He says he's doubting what Dr. Shady Nasser is saying about Tawatur.
He's doubting?
Yeah, he's saying he's not giving a source.
He wrote it's all from his book, by the way. He done his PhD on this, and recently actually he got interviewed, and then he said the same thing, like just buy his book.
Yeah, and can you please tell us the Tawatur chain of the Mus'hafs? Can you show us from the early times where the chain is? Sister just said it doesn't exist.
Yeah, or other thing he can do is just like get in touch with Muslim missionaries from Speaker's Corner or with Yasin Dutun and then ask him, because they talked about this 2 years ago, that in that 2 years now Muslims have more than enough time to come up with proper response.
Yeah, I
Just
love
call
how
them and
like
then say,
average.
please give me the answer. They are talking about it. I can't go to the police because they haven't told me yet, but they told me I can ask you because you were in that meeting. In 2 years, probably you learn how to lie about it. Please lie to me. I am begging you, lie to me. So we can simply discredit this professor who done his PhD on this topic. By the way,
I
he's
like
like
how,
professor. Okay,
I
that's the
like
right label.
yeah, and he's an Arabic speaker. I like how regular Muslims who, I don't want to put them down, I'm sorry, but did you have a PhD from Harvard in Arabic literature and Islamic studies? Did your articles come up in many journals?
And he's also he came to Cambridge as well.
He went to Cambridge.
Yeah. Yep.
And if your knowledge is that great, please show us the chain of transmission from an early manuscript.
Topkapı Musaf. Let's go with Topkapı Musaf.
Yeah, show us from any early mushafs, any manuscripts that you have.
Cairo,
show us where that information is.
Cairo, Paris, Hüseyin'i.
Yeah, provide the evidence.
Ali,
provide your evidence.
Topkapı, British Museum, any of them. Or even like, let's be very kind and generous. Why don't you give us the isnad for Birmingham Musafs? 2 pages. That should be very simple.
Yeah. Jason Al-Falso, give us the isnad of the early mushafs that sister talked about, if you have that list. Because no one in the world has that list.
Oh, we don't know, sister. Like, so we don't know. Like, they might have it. You never know. They had like whole 2 years to prepare. They might went to Birmingham and then they just put this not there. It's only 2 pages. It should be very, 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 very easy for you.
Yeah, Abbas is here talking about memorization again. I think he's a bit behind.
He needs to give us the reference. He has not given us the reference of Suyuti. Do you remember that, sister?
Oh yeah, yes. We need the Suyuti reference. Yeah, we need the Suyuti reference, Abbas, where Suyuti says the Quran of all the Sahaba was the same. The Suyuti book that I've read, Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, it talked about how the Sahaba fighting with each other about the Quran.
Just a moment. Suyuti book which you read, that was the reference he gave you.
Yeah, he gave us a reference saying, this is the proof of preservation. We looked up the reference. It was telling us the exact opposite, Abbas.
So we will talk to him once he gets the references. He's just, one thing is happening is like, Muslims are thinking they're in jungle. They can just jump from one side to other side. Give us the reference and then we move forward for healthy discussions. Anyway, so let's continue with the video. Okay?
Other scholars also, they oppose this notion because the criteria of tawatur doesn't apply to these. And this is why, let's say 5th century, 6th century, that would be 11th century, 12th century, there were scholars who were calling for this criteria of tawatur because you do want the Quran to be mutawatir. If the Quran is not mutawatir, that's a big problem. You know, it is the main source, it is the principal book of Islam.
Did you hear that? You want it to be like that. You want it to be perfect without any problems.
He said, if the Quran is not mutawatir, it's a big problem.
Yep. And you want it to be mutawatir.
And since you want it to be mutawatir, what do? You invent the mutawatir system to prove it. Amazing.
Sad, very sad. Did you get the date? So we are approximate 1,200 years in that timeline, and still we don't have those names. How beautiful it is! But around 600, around 1,200 people are asking. Okay, we need to get those names. Let's put it together. We've got to do something about it. But there is still no names. Therefore, I would be very much surprised if any Muslim who knew about this book and then who knew Professor Shady Nasser is introducing a fitna and they had 2 years to prepare, they could come up with the names.
Amazing. Sister Abbas is saying it wasn't Suyuti, it was someone else. Abbas, we've got screenshots of you giving us a Suyuti reference with volume and page. I've got a screenshot of his comment. Sister, you put it on the screen. It said Suyuti.
Yep, he did.
And
say
from that modern book that you were reading.
Yeah.
And by the way, that modern book that you were reading, the person who authored it was kicked out of the Islamic Council of Pakistan for being a heretic. That was the book you were reading. You gave us the Suyuti reference from that book as a footnote. You put it on the screen. We went to find out it was saying the opposite. So no wonder that book that you're reading, no wonder the author was thrown out of Pakistan for being a heretic against Islam. Abbas. Suyuti reference, please.
Let's continue.
And if the variant readings, the way you access this text, are not mutawatira, then you do have a theological problem. And that's the paradox here. And this is why scholars were back and forth. Even by the time of Ibn al-Jazari, he died 833, so that would be 15th century. In his early life, he was fighting for this concept of tawatur. He said, well, all the qira'at are mutawatira. But then, later on, he did change his mind, especially in the past, I would say 200 years.
Did you get that? People who decided in the first place, yep, this is like, it's going to work now. We are getting the names. It's all good. We can chase the Quran back to Muhammad with very, very good names. And then what happens? No one breaks his hip or anything. He changes his mind and come to the conclusion, actually, no. And really, really no.
Wow. Which is a paradox.
There isn't
he called it a problem and a paradox.
Yep. I think he's practicing like the words start with like P, problematic, paradox.
Yeah, we hear this word a lot in this history of the perfectly preserved book.
Yep.
Paradox. It's not the P for preservation, Muslims. It's P for problematic and paradox.
Yeah.
Sorry, Muslims.
By the time of Ibn al-Jazari, he died 833, so that would be 15th century. In his early life, he was fighting for this concept of tawatur. He said, well, all the qira'at are mutawatira. But then, later on, he did change his mind, especially in the past, I would say 200 years. There isn't a single book of introduction to Quranic sciences except that they say, well, the variant readings are transmitted via tawatur.
There are different Arabic Qurans, and we don't have those like chains for those, but in last 200 years, people start coming up with, yeah, they're all reliable. They all got these like names and then taking us back to Muhammad. What is the date? 1980s. Sorry, not 1800s.
Wow, 1800s.
Yeah, 200 years from the past to now.
Yeah, my great grandmother's time, basically.
Yeah.
That's when the Quran was preserved.
Yeah, that's like just like before, very much before 1924 when they put together one Quran, before they sunk the things.
Did you notice, sister? He said Ibn Mujahid was fighting for the concept of tawatur, trying to say yes, it exists, but then he changed his mind. He said no, it didn't.
Ibn Jazari, yeah.
Sorry, Ibn al-Jazari.
Yeah. Yep. But don't follow someone who did his PhD, who published a book and teaches at universities on this topic. Please don't follow him, because you've got to follow, because you've got to go with the idea that there is one perfect Quran. And that is all perfectly preserved, dot by dot, letter by letter, sound by sound, word by word. If anyone says something else, do not take them. Do not take them.
There's just a quick question from the chat. Please
However,
explain what...
where's the footnote? We go to the sources.
Sorry. Daughter of Christ, why don't you just say hi to individuals in the chat and give me a minute, okay?
Okay, yeah, I'm glad because KL asked to explain tawatur again. Tawatur is basically the concept where there's a chain of narration. An unbroken chain of narration goes from the present time back to the Prophet to prove that this was that something was authentically transmitted. Like person A, let's say Prophet said it to person A, then person B, then person C, to our present day. And Muslims have always said we have an uninterrupted, good, authentic chain of narration. That's what the tawatur is, going back to the Prophet. So here, what Dr. Shady Nasser was saying is that there was no such thing as chains of narration. This is something that Muslims came up with at a later date to try and prove that the Quran was authentically transmitted in a way that's believable and provable. And they were fighting for that. Later scholars that came in Islamic history fighting for that concept. So the dates which they were thinking of that was 700 years after Muhammad came. So you're talking 1300s, where Ibn al-Jazri, he lived from 1350 AD to 1429 AD. And he was fighting for that concept. He was saying, no, Quran is mutawatir, yes, but then he changed his mind later in life when there was overwhelming evidence that it wasn't. And Sister was showing us an example last time of these chains where people even disagreed with each other within the chain itself about what they were transmitting. Sorry, go on, Sister.
Sorry, what were you are giving the definition for the tawatur?
Yeah, someone in the Brother Kayal was just saying, remind us again what it meant, because it's not an English word.
Yeah. Like multiple individuals who are passing you the Quran.
Yeah.
And that's what Quran currently all stand on. Sorry, I just got this stupid message. I needed to take a look at it. Okay, let's continue with the video.
And we see that that's not the case. Can you really prove, the tawatur of qira'at at every single stage back to the Prophet? Was this the case 500 years ago or 600 years ago? And when we see things change over time, we start asking questions. Well, the way we have the qira'at now are different from the way people were reciting. And unfortunately, we don't have much documentation from that period to give an answer or an opinion based on facts, but based on these few accounts of why Uthman did this, and at every single stage of what I'm calling canonization, the reason why you want to standardize is because you have differences. You don't just come and then you want to standardize something if it's already standardized. You can't afford.
Why Quran has been standardized? Because they were differences. They were differences, therefore they wanted to make it one perfect. That's already problem. That's already problem. And look, someone just put a comment on how trustworthy is oral tradition.
What's the comment?
So oral tradition is very trustworthy because one person says something and then everyone starts repeating the same thing, and then everyone believes in that.
Well, where? In Kufa they were doing that. They had one Quran. In Medina they were doing that. They had different Quran. In Mecca they were doing that. They had different Quran.
In Kufa they had different Qurans. In Medina they had different Qurans. So example from the sister is a couple of weeks ago. And Muslims looked at the camera and then they said, Hatun was burning the Qurans. Shame I didn't do it. But other persons start like copying that and then making videos, and then everyone believed in it.
Yeah. But did you actually
that's how the oral tradition is. Like someone said something. So in 1500s, okay, in 1500s, that's 16th century. 1400s, in 1400s, Muslims were trying to figure out, okay, what are the name of the people who start reciting the Quran from time of Muhammad to 1500s. Sorry. So, but they try to figure out approximately 1,000 years, 4,000 years, what people said and who are those people, what they said. For 1,000 years, like 1400s, and then they went back and then they come up with those names. And with those names, and then they said, oh, they all recite the same thing. It is worse than Chinese whisperer. Don't fall into, oh, it is Chinese whisperer, because as you play this Chinese whispering game, first person and last person are still in the room, okay? Last person can go and check out what the first person said, and then you can ask people what they heard, and then you can figure out, oh, how the information has been failed to pass on you. But with the Quran, people are already long dead. They're already in the grave being punished by these freaking angels. There is no one who can go and then figure out in 1400s what Ibn Masud was reciting in 650s, and then who he passed it, what was that Mr. X was reciting, what was who took it from Mr. X. But what happens is, that's what they figured out in 1400s. They went back to 600s and then they come up with those names. In the Chinese whispering, first person is still in the room, last person is in the room, and then you can check it out. And when you play the Chinese whispering game, none of those Chinese whispering games are saying the things which affects your eternity once for all. Versus in Islamic version of this so-called Chinese whispering game, which I wouldn't even call that, the information is affecting your life, and those people are already dead, being punished in the grave, and in 1400s, 15th century, people are coming up with the names.
Yeah, it's not Chinese whispers. It's like this crazy game that it's even less that reliable than Chinese whispers, because there are, like you said, hundreds of years in between each person. They can't go back and check with the first person.
Nearly a century. Like, think about 600s to 1400, like 800 years. Probably they were like calling the grave, and then asking, angel, before you punish that person, remember you are gonna crush him. Before you do that, please let me get the confirmation if this guy was reciting the al-duri Quran correctly and who he took from. And then, oh, after that, dear angel, can you pass me the next person who passed him? Probably that's what was happening. Technology was like so awesome. They could communicate and have a chit chat with angels as well as people who are being punished in the grave.
And it's funny, sister, about this burning of the Quran story that people have made up about you. Even in the modern times where you have people you can take videos, you have internet, you have everything that you can prove it with, and people still made up a story that you burnt the Quran, which is not true, by the way. And it went all over the internet. People now think it's true. Muslims, by the way, they all think it's true because they heard it from person A to person B and this is in modern times. Can you imagine what it was like back in the day with no technology and nothing to prove anything?
Yep.
It's just crazy. It's just madness.
But it all shows us something very important. Quran has been perfectly preserved to the dot, to the letter, to the sound, to the word. That's all it is about. Because if that didn't happen, Allah is a liar, Muhammad is liar. That's the bottom line. And Muslims are making their way to hell. Anyway, let's continue. Oh my God, we've got still 6 minutes more to go.
Okay.
To have different versions of the Quran available among the Muslim community. Okay, so the whole, they were, I don't want to say obsessed, but this was always something that Muslims were thinking about, that we need to have a standard version. We can't afford having variations. Is to try to get rid of variations and gather all Muslims, on one codex. There are many problematic issues about, the collection, especially the committee that he put. So besides Zayd bin Thabit, or the other 3 members in the committee, the 3 of them, they were 9 to 10 years old when the Prophet died. So they were not really senior companions of him. And
I think this is very much mean. So he's saying, okay, there are different Qurans and they are going to fix this now. But what are we going to do is, let's put a committee together, and then in that committee, we all put people who were 9 years old, who were under 10 when Muhammad died. And Muhammad is the one like gives you the Quran, okay? So we trust their memory. We do trust their memory, but we don't trust the memory of Ibn Masud. And
I don't understand that, sister. Why didn't they just get the more experienced Sahaba? Why did they get the ones that were babies or children when Muhammad was around in the committee?
No, I'm guessing because probably they were playing like hide and seek with Aisha. Aisha was child, so they were child. Oh, yeah. They were playing hide and seek.
Yeah, maybe they thought that children were adults. It's funny that Muslims think that a child Aisha was adult when she married him.
Yeah, so
but at the same time, Ibn Mas'ud was calling Zayd ibn Thabit a child when he was getting the knowledge from Muhammad. Isn't that funny?
Yep. But those people who were 9 years old when Muhammad died, by the time Uthman was burning the Quran, they were 29 years old, so mid-30s, late 30s, or late 20s. Late 20s. So and those people didn't know what was happening, so and they were actually a relative of Uthman, so there is a political thing is going on there. And
yeah,
eternity of individuals, not in all occasions, because there are some verses made it into the Quran only one person's testimony, and depend on the testimony of children. But they don't take the testimony of Aisha when she says, oh, Muhammad climbed top of me when I was a child. But they put their trust in the testimony of the children who put the Quran together. Yep, I know the logic. Wonderful.
It's messed up.
And 3 of them, they were husbands for 3 of Uthman's daughters. So again, you see how politics here is, very intertwined with, with the decision of who Uthman chose in the committee to standardize the text. So again, politics is very important. People shouldn't dismiss politics and the decision of the state to standardize a text. This happened with Uthman. This happened with Ibn Mujahid. He was the chief, reader in Baghdad, and people who opposed him, like Ibn Shanabud and Ibn Miqsam, they were tried, tortured, persecuted, according to sources, imprisoned. But we always...
Uh-oh. Did you hear what the religion of peace is doing? Religion of peace is persecuting people, torturing people, putting people in prison. Why? They've got different opinions when it comes to Quran. So peaceful, so loving.
And the people who were tortured and imprisoned, they were not non-Muslim. They were Muslim. They just read differently the Quran.
Yeah, and then he puts all of his family in the committee. Oh, yeah. Well, better to obey your father-in-law. If you don't obey your father-in-law, your marriage is gonna get affected in this occasion.
Yeah, which is interesting. It looks like Uthman just wanted complete control over that committee, so he put 3 out of the 4 his sons-in-law. They're really, really young. He's older. and he can control the outcome. They can't do anything without him.
I-
Ibn Mujahid, same thing.
But to be honest, it is a good methodology. It is
And
a good
notice that
methodology. Like, do practice it if you want to come. Like, if you are Christians, if you are setting up a church, just make sure your family is in every kind of leadership role, and no one will disagree with you.
and it's interesting that the approach didn't change from breaking the hips of someone, and now they're torturing someone down in Ibn Mujahid's time, 200, 300 years later. It's the same thing. Same approach of violence against people who say oppose you, and it's the same today, Islamic countries. Same kind of spirit.
So, Mr. Abbasa is having conversation with Islam critic. I'm not sure if Islam critic kind of saw that because my comments are like paused, or answered this already. You don't know Birmingham folios are from 8th century, Abbas? You don't know Birmingham folios are from 8th century? And you don't know a fight between Sahaba is? What do you know? What do you know? And reference for that is simply go to Putin, and that's like very, very basic information. But Birmingham Folio is 2 pages, disagrees with the current Quran, while carbon dating is from around 568 to 645, which already smashes all of your Islamic tradition if you go with the carbon dating. The scripts are from 2nd or 3rd century of Hijrah. And Abbas is without any shame wasting the time of Islam critic and asking Islam critic to give him source. Yet he fails to give us basic sources. That's just like...
Yeah, he just said in the chat that Javid Mohammed, the heretic from who's still alive today, is the best scholar of Islam that he's following. So he doesn't follow Suyuti, what the Suyuti says about the differences between the Sahaba. He follows Javid Muhammad, who's alive today, who's been thrown out of the Pakistan Council for being a heretic.
But that
Islamic
person
Council.
that person is giving you quotation from Suyuti. Best thing you can simply do is, once you know your traditions are lying, your books are lying, basic thing you do is you simply get in touch with those people and then tell them, why are you lying? Why have you been lied to me? That's the basic you can do. And it will be shame that you haven't done that. It's very much shame that you haven't done that, if you haven't done that.
It's a shame that we don't have a Muslim scholar about who's expert is on manuscripts, because Quran is meant to be the Muslim book. Do we have any Muslim scholar who is expert on manuscripts?
Yeah, we do. Like Yasin Dutun is like well-known name when it comes to the Quranic manuscripts.
And what does he say about the Birmingham folios?
I think he dates that from 2nd century and 3rd century of Hijrah as well. Like, I think one of the things Muslims are following is carbon dating. They are going with the carbon dating instead of going with the script. So script is writing style of the manuscript is dated 2nd century or 3rd century of Hijrah.
But wasn't it Dawa Gang member who said that carbon dating isn't a reliable way of dating something back?
Yeah, but they didn't pass that info to Abbas.
Yeah, they all need to just form a committee and get the story straight, and then come to us and tell us.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just gonna. I'm trying to be double kind. I don't know why I'm so kind, even though people expresses that I am not kind, but I am the kindest person you will ever and ever and ever would meet, and very humble, as you can see. I'm just gonna get the picture of
Yeah, people in the chat saying carbon dating is when the animal died, not when it was written.
Yeah.
And it isn't very reliable. It just gives a bracket. Yes, I agree. We agree.
So I'm just sister, why don't you have a quick chat? I've got 511 slides just on the
Oh
Quranic
dear.
manuscripts. So I've got to find that manuscripts which is talking about Birmingham manuscripts, and then
Okay.
I'll kind of comment on it. But I've got to find it first. It's like lots of slides just for one manuscripts. But here's the miracle. I have it. Yes. Sometimes I just love my computer. By the way, my radio died.
Your radio?
Yeah, I don't know why it just died. It took its last breath. Okay. So, okay, I need to get rid of the page behind. Just a moment. We get rid of Ibn Masud. We don't need to do anything to Ibn Masud. Muslims already broke his hip. So all I do is I'll just take Ibn Masud down. So here's the Birmingham folios, okay? You can see in here, okay? Birmingham folios 1572A, University of Birmingham, 2 folios C14, okay? Dating of C40 is the carbon dating. Carbon dating for this is 568 to 645. So remember, around 650, Uthman ordered everything to be burned. Poor Uthman, go with Abbas, did very, very bad job. Very, very bad job. And the script is dated 2nd or 3rd century of Hijrah. Of course, never believe me. Don't ever believe me. He is the Putin. He's expert on manuscripts, by the way. What does he say? Apparently, some are still under the impression that Birmingham fragments are pre-Uthmanic copy of the Quran. And then in his writings, he simply says, this is from 2nd or 3rd century. So, that's the reference for you, Mr. Abbas. Please send me roses and flowers and all other things for my kindness, but let's get on with the business. So, shall we go back
Yes.
and then pick up where
Yeah.
we left? Sorry, that was distraction. I should
That's
have
very
not
kind
got...
of that's very kind of you, sister, to share that information.
I know Muslims know that information, but they're not sharing. I am the one who shares those informations, and I'm the one who gets those dangerous packages, and I'm the one who gets those loving messages from Muslims. Not very good at all. Not very good at all. But anyway, yeah. So that's I think in the just for everyone, carbon dating tells you the date animal lost its life. Okay, animal lived and then died, and then life is all gone. But not just following day. They don't write on it because this animal skin needs to be progressed. And when we look at the Birmingham manuscripts, the writing style of 2 pages are 2nd or 3rd century of Hijrah. So that will be earliest from 720 towards. But yes, carbon dating for when the animal was killed for that manuscripts is before the time of Uthman, before Uthman ordered burning of everything. If you go with that theory, then you are simply saying we cannot trust any of the most reliable Islamic sources. Why? Because if Uthman was going to burn them, Uthman didn't do a good job. Islamic tradition is lying. Uthman didn't burn them. That's the first point. Second point is it's important that like basics are being covered. And yeah, like if you just follow the carbon datings, you do have some carbon datings are dated around 300 or 400. So that's like 300 or 200 years before Muhammad even received his revelation. So just beware of that. And when it comes to the Birmingham manuscripts, folios, sorry, they have got only a couple of surahs, and within these surahs, it doesn't even go with the proper order it's supposed to follow. There is a jumping in Surah 19, and those things just...
Yeah, so it doesn't even match the Quran that we have today.
Yeah, yes, I did actually. I remember I made a video on how there were textual variations in the Birmingham folies, because one of the Muslim missionary, without any shame, tried to deceive people by, I can read the Birmingham manuscripts, versus like Professor Shady Nasser simply says, no, actually you need those dots. But Muslims were without any shame went in front of the camera and then pretend that they were reading from the Birmingham manuscripts, Birmingham folios. Sorry, I shouldn't be saying manuscripts because they are just folios. They are just folios. Anyway, so let's get with the proper business. Sorry, that was a distraction and I should not fall into those distractions. Do forgive me, but let's continue.
Look at how state enforced this kind of standardization. The Arabic script was not developed. It was derived from Nabatean, as Semitic philologists researched and determined. We didn't have vowels. We didn't have diacritics. Yes, there are certain ambiguous passages in the Quran that you do need vowels and diacritics, and this is why readers disagreed. The disagreement are on those in these cases where you don't know if you should use passive or active. You don't know who the subject is. You don't know how to conjugate, the verb, the prefix, and we even have manuscripts in Arabic, even 600-700 years after dots and diacritics were developed, where you don't have diacritics. So diacritics and vowels are not the main reason. They are one of the reasons. There are very, very obvious cases where, because you don't have diacritics and vowels, there were variant readings. It's very obvious. It has nothing to do with dialects, has nothing to do with plurality. It has nothing to do with different modes. It has to do with the script, right? And also Muslim scholars are divided. So, a group would say that Al-Hajjaj did introduce reformation of the script, and other scholars say no, he didn't, right? And I do believe I'm inclined to say that actually he did include certain reformation in the text. Okay, so usually, of course, we have contradictory accounts in Islamic tradition. Everything there isn't a single thing that we don't have contradictory traditions about. The point is,
sorry.
it wasn't Al-Hajjaj.
So
Wow.
There are manuscripts simply gives you the passive or active version of it. There are manuscripts gives you plural to singular, and even 500 couple of couple of 100 years after dots, you've got the dots. You've got manuscripts without dots. I just think that's just wonderful.
Yeah, and he said, did you hear what he said? Nothing to do with dialects, nothing to do with the plurality.
Yeah,
it is to do with the different readings because of the no diacritics and vowels at that time. That's why they disagreed.
That's one of the reasons. Yeah. Wonderful.
And did you notice he said that every single thing in Islam we have contradictory accounts on?
That's what I picked. Like every single thing they have is like contradiction. That's like
wow.
So it helps you to like be more confident in Islam, how awesomely, perfectly and beautifully corrupted. And it has been corrupted so well Even with your brain in freezer, you still know it's corrupted. And especially when it comes to Quran, as well as biography of Muhammad. Just so lovely. Don't
Like,
you love this guy?
how do you follow a religion that every single thing in it people disagreed on? How do you know which one to follow? Which account to follow? Like, even down to the Quran itself.
You pick and you go to the cherry field where you pick up cherries, and then you say, yeah, I like this color of cherry, I am gonna have this one. No, I don't like this one, I will do this one.
That's, yeah, which is what we see Muslim apologists and dawah gangs doing, cherry picking what they like, what their conscience likes, what their tastes.
What
it's
suits
like,
them, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a supermarket. You just pick what you like and abrogate and reject the sources that you like, pretending like you're your own prophet, basically.
Yeah.
Be your own God.
Very much perfectly preserved. Very much perfectly preserved with the holes, and with there is nothing, like everything in Islam has contradiction in it. Everything. Like, it just, Muhammad was full of contradiction. Allah is full of contradiction. That's not enough. Islamic sources are full of contradiction. But still, what is the conclusion is, with all those things, even though there are lots of different Arabic Qurans, even though there are holes in the narrative, even though it's all messed up, problematic, all those kind of things, still it has been perfectly preserved, dot by dot, letter by letter, sound by sound, word by word.
And remember, Allah preserved his words, the letter, Surah 15 verse 9.
Yeah.
But you don't know, in some of these passages, the passive, the active,
yeah.
well, the subject
Quran,
is in the sentence.
Yeah. Even like Quran only Muslims have, I think, I need to check, I haven't used it for a while, Surah 30 or Surah 32, even they like has a big footnote, says, oh, actually this can go either way. In one of them, like, it's they won the battle, in a other one they like got defeated. It's like full messed up. Anyway, let's just finish the video.
Let's say it wasn't him, this person specifically. We do know that there were certain reformations in the early manuscripts. So you have the language of pre-Islamic poetry and the language of the Quran. They are very similar, okay, in terms of syntax, vocabulary, etc. And even if someone like al-Tabari, who's an exegete, he's always quoting grammarians. So grammarians are authority number one when it comes to variant readings. The Muslim scholars later on clashed with grammarians, because grammarians would be criticizing some variant readings. I would say, well, this reading is not grammatical. This reading is not good. And later, Muslim scholars who wanted to say, well, all the readings were correct. God doesn't speak bad Arabic. And this is why someone like al-Tabari or people, or Zamakhshari, or even Ibn Atiyah, those exegetes, they were saying, well, wait a second, this reading is really not grammatical. This is bad Arabic. Arabs would never say something like that. And what happened is that Dani, he died mid-5th Hijri, mid-11th century. And he said, I'm going to limit myself, to 2 transmitters per reader, so that it would be easier for people to memorize these variants. And it became very successful. And it started to be taught at different schools. And what made it more popular is that 100 years after Dani, al-Shatibi came, and then he versified this manual into a poem. He versified it, and poetry is it's very important in the Arabic tradition. You memorize things through didactic poems. We don't want people to think that the readings are the ahruf, because as I said multiple times, no one knows what the ahruf is. And if someone tells you that he or she knows what the ahruf is, well, no one knows. So we take the word of Muslim scholars who spent years and years and years trying to understand what the ahruf are, and no one knows. There are speculations, but at the end of the day, they're only speculations.
Is there a consensus on the number of readings today?
You have 3 groups. You have one group that will tell you 7. They have the other group that would tell you 10, and you have smaller group that would tell you 14. So the system of the 14, has been around for the past 200, 300 years. People were, trying to add 4 readings. So that's why going back to early sources and reading, these documents, it gives us, a good map of what people thought at different periods of time, and not to apply, certain notions that people believe in now. But they were not existent, centuries before.
That's the end of the kind of summary video. Full video can be watched in Islam Critics website, YouTube channel. Sister, people are 200 years ago, people are still trying to figure out which Quran they should add into the readings, and this so-called ahruf which is revealed to Muhammad. Allah knows best, no one knows. So when Muslim missionaries tells you what is ahruf, just look into their eyes and remember those look, because that is the look of lying.
Yeah, I mean, since the holes in the narrative by Yasser Qadi, the interview, lots of dawah gangs have come out trying to explain what ahruf are. Yeah. Are they the best scholars of the entire world history? No one knows what the ahruf are for 1400 years. No one knows. How can they know, sister?
Allah knows best.
And if no one knows and Allah knows best, then what's the point of having them at all?
Come on, sister. You can't ask those basic questions, don't you know? Quran has been perfectly preserved. Even the Sahaba is all agreed. There's lots of different Qurans. It's been perfectly preserved. They don't even know if it's like official 7 different Qurans with plus 14, because remember they said, oh, each Rida has their 2 students, and then or 10 Quran plus 20, because each reader has their own. 14 plus 28, remember, because each reader has their 2 students. But with all those numbers, bottom line is, it has been perfectly preserved from time of Muhammad to today. Dot by dot, letter by letter, sound by sound, word by word. That's the huge lie still people are telling.
And did you notice, sister, what he said about the Arabic of the Quran? He said it's very similar to pre-Islamic poetry, which goes to show that it's from a human being, because it's similar in the language. And we did a couple of videos, sister, about the grammatical errors in the Quran. Arabs were saying this isn't good Arabic.
Yeah.
Did you notice? And people have been saying, oh, the Arabic comes from the Quran, the Arabic language. No, it doesn't. The Arabic language existed before the Quran came, with its own grammar and rules, just like any other language in the world. Quran came and it was bad Arabic. And people were saying, Arabs will never say anything like this. This is bad Arabic. And some of that bad Arabic still exists today, folks, in the Quran, in the Hafs Quran we have now.
It is, I find it's like wonderful. And by the way, just let me verbalize once again. In 2018, Yasin Dutun trained Muslim missionaries and some Muslims to come up with proper response to Professor Shady Nasser's arguments. And his professor, because he's looked into field and then he's done lots of study on these different Arabic Qurans and all those messed up stuff. And still Muslims are having 2 years, like 2 years, and still no response. And some of the Muslims in the chat still are just like, oh, give us the reference. Oh, what was the other thing? Oh, Sahaba is all agreed. According to who? According to Coronation Street movies, yes, but not according to Islamic tradition and according to reality. Have you got any other points, sister?
I want to ask, I want to say that the reason Muslims are frantically asking you for sources and references is because all this knowledge is been kept from us. I say us, me as a former Muslim. This is new. So they're frantically asking, where are you getting this from? Where's your reference? Because People don't teach this history. The most important book in the whole of Islamic world, the Quran, people don't know the history of how it came about, how it was compiled. And I want to ask the Muslims today, if the Quran was perfectly preserved and everybody agreed, why do you have 1400 years of history with all these complications and details? People coming in, trying to limit readings multiplying, the 50 readings or even more at some point, with all these characters coming in Muslim history, trying to limit the readings. Actually, forget all that. The first ever Uthman, why did he have to burn anything if everything was the same? It's not a difficult question.
Another thing helpful to remember, even their Muslim scholars expressed, we've been keeping this information from Muslims, and now they've been exposed. And we've got to deal with it. And how we deal with it? We edited videos, we take the comments down, we take the full video down, we claim copyrights for the videos, all those kind of things, and then we hide it again.
In a way, I wish they were honest Muslim scholars from the beginning, or dawah gangs or Muslim apologists from the beginning, to say we have this history, we have these holes, so Muslims will be better prepared to answer these arguments. But because the knowledge has been secret all this time, now it's all exposed, now they're not prepared to answer because this is all new information. You see? This should have all been out in the open from the beginning. And it shouldn't have been taken to such an extreme to say letter by letter, dot by dot, sound by sound, because now Muslims are going to be shocked to see that they've been lied to such an extent. But I'm grateful to God for this, because this is how God, we pray that God will take Muslims out of Islam now, to see how much they've been lied to and to what extent.
If the most trusted individuals are lying to you, there are something you've got to do about it, dear Muslim friends. And I'm not going to be here every day. I'm not going to be here every day. Daughter of Christ is not going to be here every day, or other Christian brothers and sisters are not going to be around every day, all the time. So therefore, you need to get hold on your own sources and do your own homework. And while you are still breathing out and breathing in, just give the ideology up once for all, because there are not only holes in the narrative, there are problems and problems and problems. And main problem is this: it is taking you to hell. That's the main problem. That is the main problem. And we can see that you are trying to justify it, but it all shows us that actually you are very much hungry for perfect eternal word of God. It all shows us actually you are very much thirsty for perfect eternal word of God. And that's God, man, Lord Jesus Christ. He doesn't have such a problems. He doesn't have like such holes. He's got holes in his hand and holes in his feet. And that holes in his hand and holes in his feet, not because people were trying to hide things away. It is because my sins, his reaction to me, caused him to willingly have those holes in his hand and holes in his feet forever. Versus there are holes in the narrative of the Quran because people are being lied to and lied to and lied to and lied to. There are holes in the eternal Son of God because he poured himself, he poured his love, he gave his heart to us. That's the reason. Two very much different reasons. And only perfect eternal word of God, perfect eternal Son of God, Lion of Judah, Alpha and Omega one. He's the one who helps you to have life with God himself. That's the bottom line overall. We know where he's taking us, and we know what is waiting for us. We have this amazing hope in this broken world, versus Muslims are still going to try to fill those holes by hiding more informations, hiding more information. Very much sad, and very much sad. Daughter of Christ, do you want to summarize for us? And I feel my beauty time sleep is coming. My beauty sleep is coming.
Yeah, I'll make the summary short so you can go to your beauty sleep, sister.
Yeah, actually, I've got Skype meeting at 10 o'clock, so I've got 8 minutes
Okay.
to prepare.
Okay. Yeah, so we watched the second half of a summary video from our brother Islam Critiqued original video, which was an interview with Professor Shady Nasser about the Quran. So this time he talked about the problematic concepts, the problematic issues with the Quran, the concept of tawatur, which we talked about, the chains, which was not applicable for the Quran in the early times. He also talked about the fighting in between the Sahaba, especially Ibn Mas'ud, who had his own Quran, which was different from Uthman's, and how Uthman sent him people to beat him up, to silence him. And also this committee that Uthman put together was 3 out of the 4 were his own sons-in-law, which showed us the kind of political powers that brought the Quran about. And also with Ibn Mujahid's time, Ibn Mujahid was the Baghdad's chief reader, and he had political power. He had links to the state. And even people who opposed him and opposed his work, they were tortured, they were imprisoned. And then he talked a little bit about the Arabic script that was not developed, how even though you need vowels and diacritics to read it, those things, the vowels and diacritics, didn't come about until later. And even when they came about, there were still copies of the Quran that did not have these markings. And it was very difficult because that's why the readers disagreed. Part of the reason is because you need those marks to be able to make sense of the sentence in terms of passive and active. He also talked about the grammatic people who were experts in grammar, who did not like the grammar of the Quran, who said it was bad grammar, bad Arabic. He talked about the Hajjaj, who tried to standardize the Quran and reform it. And basically how, at the end, he concluded saying, we have to look at the Quran's history not with our eyes now and our concept of it, or Muslims' concept of it that is preserved, but to actually see what actually happened historically, including the political powers and influences on the gathering of the Quran, canonization. And the main fact is it was standardized so many times because there were differences. You wouldn't standardize something that was all the same from the beginning. And that's the main thing that we want Muslims to go home with today, the main message. Go on.
So if anyone disagrees with you, what you do is, I'll give practical tips, okay? Daughter of Christ simply summarized very well. And I've got like 5 minutes to get to the next goal. So if people are disagreeing with you, what you do is you set up a committee who is all your family. So no one can disagree with them because you are the one who is like leading them. That's the first point. Second practical tip is, if you see there are lots of items out there and they all disagree with one another, you invite a sheep to come and eat those materials or burn those materials or destroy those materials. If that didn't work, you simply sink them onto river. Those are the practical takeaways. Please practice them. They are good practical things, and we can see throughout centuries in Islamic tradition it failed to produce one perfect Quran. And you practice it and then show us that you are much better than Islamic leaders. That will be good for us to practice. And as always, I expressed actually a bit earlier, bottom line for all those things is that book is making eternal word of Allah becomes a book, yet object doesn't need a salvation. Eternal word of Allah becomes a book and then reveals his will to people, and that will is being abrogated again and again and again with all those messed up versions. Eternal word of Allah alongside of Muhammad is making you to go to hell as quick as you can. Versus, on the other hand, we've got perfect eternal word of Yahweh, who comes and dwells among us, who comes and live among us, gave himself for us on the cross. And that's not enough. He calls us his friends, his brothers. That's not enough. He offers us place in the bosom of the Father. And with that, it's not like it's taking us there, but with that, as we are offered place in the bosom of the Father, we are longing to go and spend our eternity with our Heavenly Father. And if you are breathing out and in, please reflect on that, because we don't know how long we will be living. And as long as we live, we want to make sure we are in the right, we are right with God. And you can be right with God only with his declaration through blood of Lord Jesus Christ. Beloved ones, may our risen Lord silence you with his love, and dear Muslims, may our crucified and risen Lord bring you down on your knees so that you can accept him as the Son of God, and by believing in him, you have life in eternity. And thank you very much, everyone who joined us. We will see you in a live stream tomorrow evening. God bless you all. Daughter of Christ, thank you very much, sister.
You're welcome, sister.